private sector in context with the Rio+20. As we all know, the Rio+20, we're in a very unique position because right now it's sort of the catalyst of what is going to determine our future in terms of everything from natural disasters, poverty, environmental sustainability, and growth and development. One of the key issues that I really thought was very prevalent with the framework of what is renewable energy and how that context plays into just the growth and development with Rio+20 is the fact that there's a certain discrepancy, so to speak, between the ideals of that who are developed and those who are not. I found an interesting fact, and sometimes it changes, but it said that in 2050, over anywhere from 60 to 80% of all pollution will be from the developing world. And that's because there's going to be such a surgence in terms of their economies, in terms of development, in terms of technology. And the biggest issue that they're facing right now, aside from just the feeling of that they're left behind, is the feeling that they're going to be held back because governmental bodies are now going to be regulating their opportunity to grow. And so one of the things that was brought up by the Secretary General was the idea of bridging the gap between agendas. And the biggest issue right there that I think is really important to note is that it takes more than just a governmental body to help bridge that gap. A lot of the private sector plays a tremendous role in the pollution of third world and developing countries. And there is everybody from Dole to Chevron, BP, and they all have some type of fiscal gain when it comes to maintaining the status quo. So one of the things that I've been working at Urban Green Energy is trying to bring the idea of renewable energy into a new light, change the filters and put a new perspective on it. And it's really critical to almost, so to speak, take a step back and then represent it in a way that it is exciting and there's a lot of opportunities. One of the opportunities that I've had is I've had an opportunity to work with a fairly powerful legal family in Haiti. And the project that I'm working on is electrification for rural communities. Initially, when they came to me, what they really wanted to do was just design a system where, it was like a mini power plant and they would charge the same amount for electricity, and they never really considered any of the other social impacts that, bringing renewable energy could have into Haiti. And it was really cool to watch when I suggested a different style of implementation to see them understand that not only can they gain economically, but they also can bring a wealth of resources into communities that traditionally don't have the opportunities. One of the biggest things for the UN has always been for education, and it's a very big situation right now. So what we did was we found a way to tailor the renewable energy package that we're presenting, so it's a wind and solar solution, to establish them at schools where we then provide children with batteries, so they have, and an LED, so they have light and electrification. But there's a couple things going on here. First off, the kids are incentivized to go into the school, so they're constantly being drawn back to a place of learning because their battery has multiple uses at home. When the child goes to bed, the parents are going to use the battery to either charge cell phones or to turn on the radio or for other uses. But then also on top of that, it also allows for an increase in communication, which is critical for economic development. So there's these things that the private sector can influence if we take that into consideration. So going back to the whole idea of energy and what is kind of going on in the framework of the framework of the world, there's so many different projects going on right now. I currently only work on a very small aspect, but a lot of our focus, since we're very close to island nations in the Caribbean, are what is called the SIDs, the SIDs. It's rural island communities, and the whole focus is that they want to reduce their fossil fuel use by 10% by 2020. This is not as lofty as many other organizations or many other countries in terms of bringing the energy use down, but they're in a very unique area because in particular, most island nations, they have tremendous amount of wind and solar resources. In fact, if you were to collect all of the wind resources in all 39 island nation countries, you could power all of China. So the amount of energy there is absolutely tremendous. Moving that to even a more grand scale is that the private community, though, is the one that is responsible for taking note of this. One of the biggest, another big thing that the Secretary General was advocating is affordable and accessible electricity. For renewable energy to be affordable, there needs to be a shift from the current capitalistic ideals of margins and profits. We need to also integrate a socially conscious mindset that takes into account and incentivizes a socially conscious and environmentally conscious method of business. And this is something that it really right now is still in the formation stage. A lot of big companies like to say that they do it, yet sometimes, more often than not, the truth of the matter is they only put in 10%. So that work there, though, in the private sector is so critical for the governmental bodies to move forward, because the private sector funds the governmental bodies. They pay taxes, and they also work and do lobbying, and they really are trying to push their own personal agendas. One thing that is interesting is that a couple facts here. Right now, for the Rio+20, they said that 1 in 5 people lack access to modern electricity. That means out of 7 billion people, about 1.3 people have no access to electricity. This is rather incredible because from what we are here sitting in this room, we are constantly connected to modern sources of electricity. In fact, I don't know how I would be able to access or function without any electricity. My cell phone died the other day and I thought my life was going to end. So then to go up beyond that, 3 billion people rely on wood, charcoal, or animal waste for some type of fuel. The amount of carbon being put into the atmosphere alone, just with that, is very significant. If we could increase the access and reduce the reliance on traditional fossil fuels and the more polluting biofuels, we would actually be able to almost curb the pollution by 2050. I believe it said by 20%. That's more than what any developing country would be able to do. So, in kind of the grand scheme of things, from my perspective, I really have yet to see what I've yet to see what the private sector will do in terms of influencing the public sector. But it's very important for us as fellow business people and advocates for a greener and more sustainable community to reach out to our representatives and our leaders and let them know that the private sector is supporting this. Going from there a little bit, there are also renewable energy companies. I currently work for one. We design vertical axis wind turbines, so they're for urban use. The benefit for this is that you can easily transport and install one, and they're very simple. So there's a certain value creation when you bring renewable energy to a developing country. Not only can you have the opportunity to educate them about the benefits, but the energy that is being produced is can be very consistent, and it also can be relatively cheap, if not free, after a certain period of time. In the private sector, a lot still has to be done, but I think that as we move forward with Rio+20, there is going to be an incredible amount of opportunities for growth, not only in the education, but also in the development and implementation of renewable energies. And I think that is pretty much it. I was more prepared for questions.
Excuse me. Thank you, John.
So having had the governmental perspective, procedural overview of how does Rio+20 and the negotiation process work, to the corporate view, we're now proceeding to a civil society grassroots perspective. How do we as citizens become involved, and what's our role that we